and there are some priorities which is dictated by the surroundings, the context of European politics. The issue which we have selected, and as the prime guideline of our presidency, is competitiveness. Find the proper answer to the major challenge that Europeans and European Union is losing our competitiveness. So, to be more concrete, the target is that in November we would like to put together an agreement of the prime ministers and presidents of European Union on a new competitiveness pact. That's what we are working on. But of course there are two other issues which you can consider as priority. This is the war. Don't forget that the European Union is a peace project, and now we have a war in Europe. And the other one is migration, which is disintegrating more and more the European structures, and you can see the immediate consequences just the last elections in Germany. So we can't avoid to consider migration and war as a guideline of our activity, but the selected issue as prime target is competitiveness of the European economy.
Okay, so let's stay on competitiveness for a second. A couple of days ago, Mario Draghi was presenting to a selected group of...
Just leaked.
No, just leaked, no. There are a few speeches around where you can absolutely understand what's the direction, and they repeated very clearly that to be able to compete, Europe has to be strong, united, more united than ever, or there is no alternative. It's gone. We are not going to have any possibility to be relevant and to play our role in the global scenario. So the idea is be even more united with a very strong agenda in terms of union, which seems to be a little bit on the opposite direction from what you normally say about Europe.
So when I'm speaking about the competitiveness of Europe, I mainly mean three things. First is the reconsideration of the Green Deal, because up to now the Green Deal is run against the business community and the logic and interest of business. A clear example is just the latest decision of the European Union on customs of Chinese cars. I met previously the main car producers, leaders in Europe, BMW, Mercedes and others, and they said it's very much against their interest. So if there is a sector of industry which we would like to protect, to introduce some protectionist custom system, but the leaders of that sector disagree with that, why we are doing that? So it's obvious that the Green Deal is not managing together with the business, it's managed many times against the interest of the business. So therefore the reconsideration of Green Deal is necessary, that's the first. The second is bureaucracy. So if we would like to be more competitive, we need far less complicated bureaucratic procedures and less bureaucrats anyway. And the number three is to make decisions to draw back, to invite back the investments to Europe, because now even the European companies are investing in North America and China instead of investing in Europe, because the climate of investments in Europe is not attractive enough. So this is the three main issues when I'm speaking about competitiveness, is the very concrete points we are negotiating on.
And on the side of being more united and being more effective in working together?
It's always good if you have clear targets. So to work together is not a target. The question is to work together for what? So if you don't define the target, cooperation by itself is not a value, you know? So the target creates a value and the guideline. So that's, of course.
The targets could be a more integrated Europe on fiscal issues, on common debt, on common defense. I mean, there are tons of priorities.
I have another approach. I understand your point, but I have another approach. if we consider cooperation and closer cooperation at that level. I think what we need is a stronger cooperation on the market union, definitely. Stronger cooperation on market union. Strengthen it as much as we can. If we speak about the political union, we don't need it at all. Forget about it. So we don't need political union. That kills the European Union in terms of competitiveness. It's a kind of disintegration factor. And then, if you think about cooperation, the union of defense, it must be established. So, in a nutshell, more union on markets, no union on political issues, and to establish a political union on defense. That's the guideline I follow.
You know, it's kind of weird because this morning President Mattarella, introducing and opening this event, was telling us that Europe cannot be just a common interest on economic issues, that the democratic process inside Europe, which means also discuss, have different views and vote, is the key part of it. If not, there is no Europe.
Of course, it's obvious. But the political challenge is not coming on that field. If you look at what is the political challenge to the European Union, which is totally reshaping the political arena, is the war, the migration, the gender, and labor-based society, full employment. These are the issues, not the very general European values. We all agree on general European values because we have a basic treaty. The basic treaty says clearly what are the basic values as fundamentals of the European Union. So there's no discussion on that at all. But there are issues, even existential issues, which we don't have common answer. And this is war and peace, migration, gender, labor-based society, full employment. These are the real issues. That's the reason why I'm saying that we should be careful to argue in favor of political union, because on the war, on the gender, on the migration, and on the labor-based society issue, we have different approaches. So if you force us to come together on issues we don't agree, you disintegrate the European Union. You look at migration. Migration is an issue which is a disintegrating factor. Why do we need it? So if you have a problem in Italy and in many countries that you decided to let many migrants come in, and now you have difficulties how to manage to live together with them. It's a serious problem. But there are some countries which never took that road. We never let them in. So we don't have migrants at all, zero. We have a problem, not how to leave them together, how not let them come into our countries. It's two different issues, you know. So you can't manage both different kind of difficulties on the same political instrument. So it would be far better, let's say, on migration to provide opt-out for those countries who would not like to follow the common migration policy. It's far better to provide opt-out than force them to come together than disintegrating by the conflicts of the whole European structure.
This morning there has been a debate on this stage about the fact that migration can't be considered as a wall because there's legal migration, which will be very much needed in future if you have a look to demography and the labor market. But
yeah,
again, I don't want to leave too many topics aside because we have also to open the floor, and I'd like to talk
it's
about
an
the war.
important point, but who defined whether you need migration or not? Is it Brussels or you? It's impossible.
Maybe you define it together, deciding to be competitive together?
No. The question is why this issue does not belong to the national sovereignty. So to have migration, it's a decision of Italy, France, Germany, Hungary, Poland. It cannot be a common decision. Why you would like to force us? I understand on migration. I understand that you probably here or in Germany, you think that migration is a civilizational issue, and you think that if two different kind of culture...
No, I was discussing about the economy of migration, not about civilization.
May I have my point? So if you think that to live together two civilizations is useful and provide a better society, you can have a right to decide to do so. But if some other countries think it's too risky because of terrorism, because of public safety, because of the social burden, and if countries think it's too risky, we would not like to have that kind of new society, why we don't have a right to say, no, That's the question, you know. So that's the reason why certain issues should not belong to Brussels to be decided, but rather stay on the national level, belonging to the sovereignty of the member states.
Yeah, again, if you translate this into economy, that could be a problem when you come to talk about...
You are right, but whether is it your job or to Brusselian bureaucrats to decide whether in Hungary
too
or
many
in Italy,
other topics to touch upon.
Sorry, but I would like to put a point at the end of my answer. So, who can define and make a decision whether you as a country should live with migrants because it's reasonable economically or not? Whose decision is that? It belongs to the people and the elected leaders of the nations, not to the empiristic center of any integration reforms. We will never accept that, of course.
Okay, let's move to the war.
Sorry, was it unpolite? Was it unpolite?
No, it's okay. We're discussing. There's not a matter of being polite.
So I'm not sure whether I could have different opinion than the general mainstream.
It's possible to have different opinion. That's democracy, and I like it. So that's fine.
Please like me to conclude my sentence.
No. And the problem is, okay, let's talk about war. Okay, and Russia invading Ukraine. One day you said. The problem is not who invaded whom, which I don't think Ukrainians share as an opinion. And when you got to presidency, immediately there was kind of a turmoil because you didn't say anything to anybody, looks like, and you went to Kyiv and Moscow and Beijing all in a row. So,
and Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. Exactly. And Mar-a-Lago as well. But to Mar-a-Lago we will go in a second. Let's stay in Europe for a second. So basically, what's your idea, if there's one, of how you can move towards the end of this war that Russia started with the invasion in February without translating that into a defeat for the Ukrainians?
So my experience on wars, this is not my first war. I'm serving as Prime Minister more than 22 years. So my first war was the Balkanian War. And I do remember the war on Georgia. So what I'm speaking about is not reading things, you know. I have some experience, is how to manage wars and how to manage peace. And the Balkan War was just the next neighbor to Hungary. So we were in a very dangerous situation. So I have some experiences. And that's the reason why I thought that we have to do a peace mission. The first lecture I have got from my practice is...
Mr. I'm afraid they don't hear you too well, so that would be much better. Let's see.
So the first thing is that if there is no communication, no chance to stop the war. So communication is the number one. Very few wars in the European history went on without communication with the fighting parties. And what we are doing is bad because we don't have communication line to the Russians. So we need communication to Ukraine and we need communication to Russia as well. That's the first. The second is ceasefire. So if we are waiting to have a peace plan which is accepted by both warring parties, there will be never peace. Because the first step is not the peace plan. The first step is ceasefire. If you look at the stories of the wars in the last 30 years, at least 3 ceasefires belong to one peace plan. So you can't start to make peace by peace plan. Peace plan is very important. But first communication, second ceasefire, then to start to negotiate on peace plan. This is the right order. We are not doing that at this moment. That's the reason I went to Kiev first, then to Moscow, then to Beijing, then to Washington NATO summit, and then to Mar-a-Lago, hopefully to the next president of the United States, to discuss the war.
It's done. It's already done.
Hopefully,
you have
hopefully. We can discuss the odds, but this is not the issue for today, probably. So I went there to understand what are the chances of the peace. And my conclusion was, especially after the two meetings with the president of Ukraine and Russia, that there is no intention, neither sides, to have peace. Both parties said, both leaders said, that they think that the time is on their side. If you think as warring party that the time is on your side, you will continue. So my impression is that there is no real intention, whatever they are saying, there is no real intention, neither sides, to make a ceasefire and a quick peace. So therefore, that was the reason I went to Beijing and to Washington as well. So I think now we should create an international context and surrounding which embodies and expresses convincingly that the whole world, not only the South, but the whole world, even Europe, would like to have ceasefire as soon as we can. So without having that international surrounding war, just the two parties to convince any of the warring parties, it's not helpful. So we need a big circle of peace of friends. Otherwise, we can't move to the peace. That was my impression.
Yeah, I would leave Mar-a-Lago on the side for a second, because the fact that you went to Mar-a-Lago and with the candidate criticizing the President of the United States can be discussed in your actual capacity. But let's leave it aside for a second, because I don't want to steal time to the audience. So I think we have a bunch of people that are asking questions, and I see hands in the room. Let me leave the floor to the first question from Mario Monti. Presidente, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister and Mr. President at the time. I have been following you with great interest always, sometimes with concern, ever since the mid-90s. At the time, Hungary was working hard with the European Commission in order to join the EU. Could you help us understand two facts, both of which concern you? One is that as soon as you took the office of rotating president of the Council of the EU, you, without any mandate, started a series of very, very high-level explorations in the sphere of foreign policy and politics. So, and that was done without, so you thought that one European personality in that position should and could do that. But the other fact is that you are on the record as being against any move towards qualified majority voting in foreign policy, which means that you have the view that all but one could, that the one could block the all of the rest. Could you help us, at least me, to see the coherence, if there is any, between two positions? And marginally, you seem, we have seen now, to believe in the strength of convictions of countries and politicians, but also in the unvariability of those conditions. Are our countries, our cultures, our political positions so stubborn that you can say this country is for, this country is against? If I take my country, that you know well, we have changed so much about our mindset, our vision of the world, our culture, our willingness to cooperate with the rest of Europe ever since we have been there. Should those who engage in European politics start from your point of view that nothing can change, or maybe not.
Prime Minister, just 1 second, because I want to remind the audience that you can ask for more questions on the app, or at least waving at me at the end of the answer. Please.
The answer to the first question, Prime Minister, is obviously yes. That's the reason why I have done what I have done. I think if you are a Prime Minister, you can travel all around the world and you can try to negotiate, and then you have to have a loyal cooperation with the other Prime Ministers. That's the reason why I sent, and later on it was leaked and probably published as well, all the reports I have done for the Prime Ministers about my negotiations on peace. So it was not a secret mission. After every mission, in 12 hours, it was a written report on the table of all the Prime Ministers and Presidents of the European Union. What is my experience? And finally, when I concluded my first trip, because I'm still working on the peace anyway, but not publicly that known as it was beginning of July. So when I concluded the first round, I made a suggestion, a report, summary, to the Prime Ministers what should be done if we would like to stop the war and the expansion of the conflict. Because my perception, I'm speaking about the beginning of July, was that if we don't do something immediately, the brutality of the war will grow soon. And if you compare where we are now, beginning of September, to the position where we were in beginning of July, now the level of confrontation and number of victims are far higher than it was. So I think my prediction was right, and my suggestions to the other leaders were right. And it's, that's European Union, as I said. They don't take it seriously into account, and they don't act on that basis. They have the right to do so also. But it was a bad decision. On qualified majority, it's impossible to create a qualified majority-based foreign policy, not because only Hungary, but all the minor countries. So it's impossible that the foreign policy of Hungary is defined by Germany and France and probably Italy. It will never happen. That would be the end of sovereignty of our country. So not only Hungary, but many of the minor countries, not as big as you are, or the Germans and the French, will never accept qualified majority on foreign policy. If they would do so, they would lose immediately the right to govern their country. There is no public majority behind that approach at all in Central Europe, may I say clearly. Compromise, that was the third question, if I understand correctly. Of course, there are certain issues which are basic, certain, fundamental, when you cannot give up your position, and there are certain issues when you can make deals and agreements and compromises, of course. That's how the European Union works, on many issues quite successfully, on other issues unfortunately not. But the basic treaty is the main guideline. The basic treaty says what issues belong to the Brusselian bureaucrats or the qualified majority of the leaders, and which issues belong at all not to the European perspective, because it belongs exclusively to the national sovereign member state countries, and which are the issues where unanimous decision is necessary. So when I'm defending the position of no qualified majority in foreign policy, I am standing on and I'm defending the present legal position of the European Union.
Thank you. If there is any other question, please raise your hand. Emma Marciagaglia.
Mr. President, thank you for your speech. I'm not sure I understood well, but since I think that you are right in saying that competitiveness of Europe has to be at the core of Europe's strategy, I agree with you that a reconsideration of the Green Deal is needed. I agree that bureaucracy and attraction of investment are fine, but I also think that more integration is needed. So did I understand well that you are in favor of more single market, that you are in favor of the Union of Defense, that you are in favor of the Capital Market Union, menu of the Banking Union, and maybe also this you didn't say, but it's a question of common debts in Europe, because if this is, I mean, I understood well, I think it's interesting to have some more consideration from your side.
May I just repeat first? More integration on the field of market and economy is rather good. It's a common sense. Prime Minister Letta is here. We just discussed at the Prime Minister Summit his report, which targeted also on competitiveness. And we are waiting for the paper of Mr. Draghi, Prime Minister Draghi, to come out soon. So I think there is a big consensus around that in favor of competitiveness, we should work more on bank union and more single market issues. Common debt is a different issue. So Hungary is not in favor of common debt. We would not like to be indebted together with Italy, even Germany, or any other country. So members of Eurozone has a different situation. Some countries are not member of European Union, and those who are not, of Eurozone. So those who are not member of Eurozone, why should we have common debt with those countries who are in the Eurozone? It's two different kind of logic. That would be not reasonable. I would like to repeat again, more union on market and economy, no union on political issues, and establishing a union of defense, because we don't have at all. So I'm very much in favor of to create a council of defense ministers, but what we don't have at all at this moment. So we are speaking about more defense and common defense, and we don't have a common body inside the council structure which would deal with that. So, and so on and so on. So, I think the answer is not as simple, more union or less union. On certain territories we need more integration, on other territories we need less. This is the balance we have to build up.
Thank you. There's a question here, Samantha Cristoforetti.
Really quickly, actually a follow-up. I find it very interesting that you are in favor of common defense, but not of a common foreign policy. I mean, to me, maybe I'm wrong or maybe you have a different opinion, defense is an instrument ultimately of foreign policy. So how do the two go together?
I suppose you mixed up military with defense. It's not the same thing. Defense is defense, defend yourself. To use military for foreign political interest, that's a different issue. NATO is a defense alliance. It's not a military alliance. Don't mix it up. So the ultimate reason to have defense union is to defend yourself, not to attack somebody else, not to force militarily somebody else to follow your foreign political issues. It's not the way. I'm speaking about not military union, I'm speaking defense union.
Okay, I think we're almost there. I see our Minister of Foreign Affairs coming in the room. And let me just go back for 1 second to Mar-a-Lago because I'm curious. And there's a prevailing wisdom in Europe that normally you shouldn't take position on US elections. You should stay kind of neutral. You have been clearly expressing your position, going to Mar-a-Lago twice in a bunch of weeks, and at the same time criticizing Joe Biden. How comes? Why did you decide to be so outspoken? Even in this capacity,
balance,
not just as a prime minister.
Balance is important. So we would not like to involve into domestic political issues of any other country, only till the point as they do with our politics. So what I'm doing is exactly the same level of involvement of Hungarian Prime Minister into the American election as the American bureaucracy administration, democratic administration, is involved into the Hungarian domestic affairs. So I keep the balance. That's the first. But second, there is another reason why I'm so much in favor of Trump. Because my understanding is that losing the competitiveness of the West and especially the European Union, our response up to now is rather a kind of block formation, economic blocks. And we have a political expression of the same thing. Democracies, again, also autocracies. But the approach of President Trump was different as is different. This is a plan of deal-making. So what we need, deal-making approach. Otherwise, it will be difficult to cooperate with the western part of the world economy, with the eastern part of the world economy. It will be not without conflicts, even, and discussions and disputes between the European Union and America. Trump possible presidency does not mean that there will be no difference of interest in this field. But a deal-making approach is far better than to create a kind of blocks of the Eastern world economy and the Western world economy. And we are moving to that direction. And I think it's totally against the competitiveness of the European Union. It's not the interest of Europe. Our interest is to cooperate well with the West, which means United States, and to cooperate economically as much as we can with the East. Now China and even with the Russians after the war. And on the territories when there are no sanctions, I would suggest to cooperate even with the Russians.
So if you accept the idea of the second Cold War we were discussing this morning, you would stay in between?
No, I lived 26 years of my life in Cold War. When the world economy was not united, it was divided into two parts. And may I say that 26 years of my life, personal life, and the life of my nation was rather bad. So when the world economy is divided into blocks, Central Europe and guys like me, we are always on the losing side. So I don't support any Cold War, any blockage, any blocking approach. I'm supporting a unified world economy as much as we can. And we Europeans, even having some disadvantages, we should be better and better and better and to compete. To compete and increasing our level of performance more and more and more. This
was supposed to be my last question, but they're telling me that there is one question, so super quick question and quick answer. Where does it come from? I don't have the name on the screen. Me lo dica pure apertamente, non c'è problema. No, così non ci riesco, leggo il labiale ma con fatica, quindi con piacere, o se no se alzate la mano e... Steven Erlanger, somewhere in the room.
Yes, way in the back, being hidden by everybody else. Prime Minister Orban, we met when you were first Prime Minister. We were both a bit skinnier then. What I wanted to ask you was about relations with NATO. You're talking about a European Defense Organization, which is something the Americans have actually want a bigger pillar, and yet you won't let NATO supply Ukraine from Hungary. So is NATO an alliance for picking and choosing? Do you think a European defense organization, as you describe it, would it be a rival to NATO, or do you want to work within NATO? Would it have different foreign policy views, do you think? It'd be great if you could explain a bit more what you mean. Thank you, sir.
I think this is one of the prime questions for the future. And this is under discussion even inside the Prime Minister Council, the European Council. May I introduce only my position? So I think the experience of this war, Ukraine-Russian war, revealed the fact that Europe is weak. Militarily, on the industrial side, and the army side as well. So we are too small, we are too weak. And without having a coordinated industry of defense, without having a coordinated army building process of the member states, we cannot be stronger than we are today. So I think there's no question about it. The question is whether it should be inside NATO or outside NATO. And the reason why it is a smart question is that there are some members of European Union who are not members of NATO, and other members are. And the question is whether we can build up a European defense structure where the non-NATO members are part of it, and at the same time this whole European architecture is belonging to NATO. So the question is very much relevant. My answer is yes, it's possible. So in my understanding, the European defense system is belonging to NATO, and this is the European flank of NATO. That's how I imagine.
Very important. Thanks, Prime Minister Orban, for being with us this morning. It has been interesting and important. Thanks for sharing your visions with us. And now we move to Italy. Thank you very much. Ferruccio De Bortoli is approaching the stage con il Ministro degli Esteri.